This is MakerGalaxy.
We're always talking about the future of design, the future of technology, the future of making. In a world where digital checkups will allow patients to interact with doctors from home. A world where a vibrating shoe will give directions to the blind. How do we find the next big thing? MakerGalaxy is a show that explores the crossroads of design, technology, and the future of making. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Simon Martin, coming to you from NYC, and this week we talked with the founder behind a new Product Design Accelerator that, similar to other incubators and think tanks, aims to help guide new companies through the process of creating physical products. Bolt is the name of that company, and Ben Epstein is the lead product designer and founder of the Boston-based firm. We'll talk with Ben about everything from how he developed the idea for Bolt to things he's learned in the hyper-accelerated product design process. Today's episode is brought to you by the Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer. Offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors, the Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Welcome, Ben. We'll get into Bolt in a minute, but before we do, we want to know, where can we find the best ice cream sundae on earth?
I don't know if I have a good answer to that.
Okay. What about what's your favorite dessert then?
Favorite dessert? I am a huge creme brulee fan when done well.
You're a sophisticated man.
Thank you.
Where can we find the best creme brulee on earth then?
Usually in Europe, unfortunately.
I'll agree with you there.
Yeah, but sometimes when you're over there, it's worth finding a particular kind of place. France tends to be the best in my opinion.
Totally. So, Ben, let's start from the beginning. Who are you, and how did you get started in the field of product design?
Sure. I've been a product designer my entire life before I even knew what that was. Just a perpetual tinkerer. Always playing with things ranging from Legos to erector sets to cars to model airplanes, et cetera, et cetera. I started a design consultancy when I graduated from college. If you're not familiar with that, companies like IDEO, Continuum, Frog Design, Smart Design, et cetera, that typically help large companies and corporate brands deal with developing and designing products, usually in a fee-for-service or consulting arrangement. And these relationships are great for big companies, and they're really problematic for tiny startup companies, which is why very few startups elect to pay $500,000 or $1 million or whatever to IDEO to help them design a product. So that was sort of the initial genesis of Bolt. It's kind of coming from the product design consultancy space. But I've helped a bunch of companies ranging from two guys in a basement to Fortune 100 companies deal with product design and development of a huge range of products.
So about how long were you in that sector? How long were you doing that for?
Braintree ran for about 5 years, and I had been working with another company before that while I was still in school called Page Product Design, which was in Western Mass where I was living. So I've been probably about 7 years or so. I've been doing product design consultancy.
And so from all that, how did Bolt come to be? I mean, we'll get into what Bolt is in a second, but how did that lead into Bolt?
It was really around the startup companies, tiny companies, 3, 4, 5 people, needing the same kind of help that big companies are getting from these consultancies. So thinking about how to build a prototype, how to understand user-centered design, and how a user is actually going to interact with a product. Understanding basic things about manufacturing and how to do pre-production work, understanding retail and logistics and supply chain management, all of these things which are critical to building a solid hardware company the resources for 3 people in a basement to get access to that were very difficult. So Bolt was built kind of from the ground up to address those problems.
So, I mean, I guess that kind of answers the next question, but for those who don't know, what is Bolt exactly? What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, so Bolt is a super active, hands-on seed stage fund focused 100% on hardware companies. So we, our primary mechanism of working with a company is through investing. So we write checks to companies, but with that investment check comes a whole bunch of other stuff that we believe is critical for hardware companies raising money. So we have a space in downtown Boston, about 10,000 square feet, about half of which is office space, half of which is a shop, high-end prototyping facility. We provide a full staff of engineers and designers, guys that have shipped millions of units of product and really know how to build stuff well at scale, that we pay full-time, 100% dedicated to helping the companies. And then we have enormous relationships with everybody from contract manufacturing houses to companies like Arrow and Protomold to, if we can't build a really high-end prototype in-house, we have relationships for discounts of other companies outside of it. So really trying to help be a one-stop shop for young hardware startups as they're growing.
How would you say you're alike, and how would you say you're different from Quirky?
Sure, totally. That's a great question. So the most important thing to make clear to folks is that we're interested in building businesses.
Okay.
The product is important, but the business is really is what drives how we operate. When we make an investment in a company, we're taking equity in that company. Not a lot of equity, and usually common stock, so it's pretty easy for founders to do. But our primary mechanism of success is having that equity become valuable, which means the business has to be worth something. And so we are incentivized to help build that company. Quirky's primary mechanism of operating is in product. So they want to ship a product, and they reward founders a royalty rate, which is typically 2 to 5% of the gross profits from the sale, to help sell product out there and help design the product. And so while we do some of those things, and actually internally the process is probably fairly similar, the external piece of how we operate and what our goals are very different.
So what are some products that you've been working on so far?
Yeah, there's a pretty big range. Again, these are all available publicly on the website at www.bolt.io. But we have products ranging from industrial weather systems to consumer electronic devices to there's a medical product. Let's see, there is a new kind of pet feeder. It's a huge range of things.
So is there a specific type of product that you look for based off of your experience so far, like a type of product that you guys can just do super well without too much in the way of not really knowing how it's going to turn out?
Yeah, there are definitely things that we know really well. So anything in the sort of connected device space, people call this the Internet of Things or M2M or whatever. Basically relatively simple pieces of hardware that have some, circuit board with some connection to the internet somehow. That's sort of like I would sort of say like the center of our wheelhouse. There are a whole bunch of things that sort of fit in adjacent spaces outside of that, many of which are B2B, so actually selling to enterprise customers. And those products are probably my favorite to work on. So those are products where there's a very specific problem that they're trying to solve. This isn't, my target market is not, 20 to 23-year-old, technological people that own iPhones. It's a much more specific, this kind of company with this kind of revenue and this kind of problem that's worth this much to them. And then they're trying to build a piece of hardware, typically connected hardware, that solves that problem. So I would say between those two things, that's kind of our 90% of the stuff that we're really interested in. And then the most important thing of what's good and what's bad is really around people. So when we're building companies, it's very important that the people that we're working with are really incentivized to build a great business. They are really happy about the market that they're going into. They have a lot of domain expertise. They have a good group of founders around them, or employees around them, or whatever. And that team dynamic is really important to the way we operate.
Totally. So, okay, let's say that I have an idea for an electronic-powered smart toilet brush. and Bolt has taken me on. What what is the process like, and how am I as your client involved in this process? Like, take me from inception to shipped product.
Yeah, so it's hugely variable depending on what you're doing. For the toilet brush product, which I'm amazed you got in. You really snuck one by us. That is there's a lot of design and development up front on how that product is going to be used by the end user. For consumer products, you have to spend a lot of time nailing design and cost. And so those two things together can take months. So we're doing design reviews. We're talking about which kinds of materials you should be using and what the shape should be and what colors you should have, and marketing and branding and all these things. Then there's a big component around actually preparing for manufacturing, and that is a really important piece that people often screw up. And so knowing what your costs need to be in order to make sense of the shelf, and what your packaging needs to look like, how many units you should be making at a time, and what components you have, and all these other things. We help companies think through that at a very detailed level. And all the while, we're doing the design and engineering with you. So we have, again, a staff of 9 people that are engineers and designers, and know all of the detailed technical things that need to be done to products to get them to the place that they need to be in order to be manufacturable and build a business around. So helping you figure out, oh my God, what draft angle should this handle have so that it can be molded efficiently in China, is an important part of that process.
I mean, first of all, like, I come from a product design background, so I know this entire process you're talking about. But if, as a hypothetical user, am I really only responsible for a napkin sketch, or am I kind of responsible for having somewhat of a background in design and engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are very few people that are companies that we talk to are just one person. So it's usually a team of people. They're usually spread across mechanical, electrical, industrial design, some sort of business. Maybe they have a deep relationship with a specific company that they worked at for years, and they saw some major problem. It can be a whole wide range of things, but there's usually 3 or 4 people that are covering various aspects and facets of the business. And then we don't do all of this stuff for companies. We help the companies do it. So typically a mechanical engineer will come in and say, hey, we have this solid model and we're trying to figure out exactly what we need to do to make it better. And we'll work with you to figure out, okay, well, you should change this, this, and this in order to make it, draftable. So it's, it can be injection molded. You need to change, instead of using, ABS, you should be using an ABS PC mix in your mold, whatever. So thinking through the entire process of how this product is built. But at the end of the day, the company and the founder and the staff are responsible for figuring out how to actually build this product and this company.
Gotcha. So what would you say have been some of the hardest challenges in developing products this way?
We're pretty new to this whole thing, right? So we only have our first product, first company whose first product being manufactured now. So that's actually not the hard part. The hard part is setting up Bolt as a company. It's a very complicated company to build. It's a venture capital firm, and I've never done that before. So as a product design guy, creating a fund is an interesting exercise, and you learn a lot through that process. The hardest thing is definitely finding the right companies that we really can help, and believe that and they really believe that we can help them. And so that's what we spend a huge portion of our time doing, talking to hundreds of companies and deciding which ones make the most sense for us to invest in, and that process is also full of lots of learning. So we've been spending a lot of time doing that recently.
Okay, so how would you say Bolt differs from other accelerators besides developing physical products rather than digital?
Yeah, so we actually don't operate like an accelerator at all. We don't have a fixed timeline. Companies don't have a demo day. There's not like, okay, on this day you have to leave. There's not a specific fixed amount of equity or cash. We have a relatively standard deal that we try to stick to with most companies, but that's not always true. So there are a lot of differences. There are some similarities too, but the most important thing is definitely the way we interact with companies is very different. So a typical accelerator program is spending most of their time and energy on helping companies put a slide deck together and raise money. And while we definitely help with those things as necessary, it's much more customized and sort of handheld and manual than a typical, we're going to run you through this process over 90 days. So we are, again, on the ground doing design and development, deciding when you should be raising money and how much money and from whom and exactly what it will be used for, rather than just put a nice number on a pretty slide. So we really try to get specific with companies and help them in the way that they need to be helped, not the way we think that they should be helped.
So all this is awesome, by the way, but it just is, for somebody to be involved with you guys, they need to be in the Boston area, right?
So we don't strictly require that companies move, but it's pretty important that they spend a lot of time here. So a huge percentage of our value comes from the fact that we have a space and a staff, both of which you have to be here to access. So if companies want to take our money but don't want to be here, there's probably something wrong with that relationship, and they're not seeing where most of our value comes from. And so we try to encourage companies to spend as much time as they can in Boston.
So what are 3 tips that you can share to our listeners of things that you've learned in this entire process, something that could help with their own product design workflows or bringing a product to market out of nothing?
Sure, there are probably a million tips. I'll pick a couple randomly. Spending a lot of time and focusing on the people that you're working with is really important. So it's very, very hard to build a business with just one person. And so being very careful and selective about who you bring on board to your company is going to be one of the most important and valuable ways you can spend your time early on. I think that it is really important to think through costs of product. A lot of people too quickly Google around and find some prices from DigiKey, and they say, "Oh, that's good enough." Every product that you build, every component that's in the product that you're building, for a consumer product at least, usually has a 3 to 4x markup at the shelf. So if you spend an extra $1 on a component, you're typically seeing $3 to $4 of increased cost to the consumer. And so being very careful about controlling that cost is really important. Getting people that you can call in to help figure that out is really useful. And being very, very explicit about thinking through the retail side of things is very important. A lot of companies spend, in my opinion, way too much time and energy focusing on direct distribution, so actually selling through their own website, or even going through e-tailers like Amazon. Unfortunately, those consumer endpoints actually aren't the most effective way to drive a lot of traffic. So in certain cases, it can work out pretty well, but for most companies, in order to really become big, you have to sell your product in a brick and mortar store. And so knowing how that relationship and that company fits into your cost structure is really important. They're taking a significant margin off the top of the product, and you have to make sure when you design it that there's enough room in your product and your cost and your price to pay everybody in your supply chain off.
Great advice, Ben. So if one of our listeners wants to check you out further, or even has an idea of their own that they want help with, how would they go about doing that?
It's super easy. Anybody can go to our website at any time. It's www.bolt.io. And there is, we're actually not open right now, but every couple of months we allow companies to upload a deck of what they're doing, just a standard pitch deck. And we take a look and try to get back to companies as soon as possible. So we try to be pretty open at looking at companies all the time.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Ben.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer. Offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors, the Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Thanks for listening in today, and if you'd like to find out more on Bolt or even submit your own company or product idea, check them out at bolt.io. On our next episode, we'll be talking to the CEO and founder of GrabCAD, Mr. Hardy Maybaum, about his newly released book, The Art of Product Design, Changing How Things Get Made. I'm your host, Simon Martin. Stay tuned and check in with us next week on MakerGalaxy.
A production of EBD Media.